This convicted serial killer with victims, including her own children, gets to celebrate her birthday on camera. How cute. Welcome to That's My Opinion, where we break down the biggest stories, uncover hidden truths, and explore why they matter. I'm Bacon Bears, and today we are talking about the sad excuse for a woman who looked a journalist dead in the eye and said, "None of these people are victims." Lori Vallow Daybell gave an interview from prison to Nate Eaton, and not only was it a masterclass in delusion, it was also a testament to why Nate Eaton might be one of the most composed journalists alive, because I could never. This video isn't just about Lori, it's about the performance, the lies, the spiritual manipulation? Question mark? And the man who didn't flinch once while facing her. As always, these videos are for conversational purposes only. Do your own research, form your own opinions, because this one's mine, and let's get started. Now, if you're not sure who Nate Eaton is or who Lori Vallow Daybell is, here's a quick primer. Nate Eaton is a journalist with the East Idaho News who's been covering this case since the very beginning. He's the same reporter who chased Lori and Chad Daybell down in Hawaii in 2020, begging for answers about her missing kids. Lori Vallow Daybell is a convicted murderer. Her children, Tylee Ryan, 16, and JJ Vallow, 7, were missing for months in 2019 before being found buried in her new husband, Chad Daybell's backyard. And Chad Daybell, a fringe religious author, is also charged in connection with their deaths. Together, Lori and Chad built this apocalyptic belief system where people could supposedly become zombies, and only they had the authority to decide who was dark or light, often leading to the death for those labeled dark, including Lori's children, her husband, Charles Vallow, and Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell. If you want to deep dive into the full case, I've got a video from when I first started true crime commentary. It's not my current polished format, but it lays out the key events. And if you want me to do a full breakdown in my current style, let me know in the comments down below. I would be happy to make that happen. But for now, let's talk about what this interview really shows and how Nate Eaton handled it like a pro. How Nate Eaton ate. When I'm looking for someone to conduct an interview, I want to see them ask the hard-hitting questions. I want someone who's not afraid to sit in that chair and ask what we're all thinking. I don't want Lori to have a platform to rewrite history. And when they try to deflect, I want them to be held accountable. And that's exactly what Nate did. He didn't let her off easy. He didn't argue or yell, but he held the line. And even though he didn't get much because Lori Vallow sucks, he still stood firm and let her expose herself. Now, before we move forward, we must go back, because if you don't know this case, then you wouldn't understand that Nate Eaton interviewing Lori Vallow in prison is a true full circle moment. In 2020, Nate Eaton was the one shouting across a resort lawn in Hawaii, "Lori, where are your kids?" And she ignored him. She walked away with a smile, drenched in sunshine, silence, and defiance, hand in hand with her Peter Griffin-looking husband, Chad Daybell.
I'm Nate Eaton with EastIdahoNews.com in Kauai, where Chad and Lori Daybell were served with 2 search warrants just hours ago. Lori, Nate Eaton with East Idaho News. Can you tell me where your kids are? Where are your kids?
No comment.
No comment? They've been missing for 4 months. You have nothing to say? You're over here in Hawaii? Where are your children? Yeah, why don't you just give us a comment? Just tell us where they are. Chad, where are Lori's kids? What happened to Tammy, Chad? Can you tell us what happened to Tammy? Why have you guys been in Hawaii for so long? Listen, just tell people what's happening. There's people around the country praying for your children, praying for you guys. Why don't you give us answers?
That's great.
That's great. That's great that they're praying for you, praying for your kids. What? You have nothing to say? Did you do something to your children? Are your children still alive? That's a simple question. I've got 3 kids of my own. I can tell you every minute where my kids are at. Where are your children? What do you guys plan to do now? You have 5 days to get your children in front of a judge in Rexburg, then what? Are you guys innocent of any crimes? Have you committed any crimes? Chad, you guys have a lot to say on your podcast. You don't have anything to say now? Lori? Do you believe that you were instructed by God or others to do something for your children? If you could give a message to them, what would you say? Listen, if you just talk to us, we'll leave you alone.
The family's worried. Tammy's family's very worried.
Tammy's family's very worried. Lori, your mother, Kay, came out. Kay and Larry, they're offering a $20,000 reward for your children. And you're over here on the beach? This is your chance to tell your story. Nothing you want to say? One last chance right here? Anything you want to say to the people in Idaho? Lori, you have a lot of cash there in your baggie. Were you guys planning to leave Hawaii? Were you planning to take off? And with that, Chad and Lori darted into this resort, and they still have not come out.
Now, in 2025, that same man sits across from her inside a maximum security prison. And he asks her, why didn't you tell me then? And he's referring to her children. Why didn't you just tell me where the kids were? Why didn't you tell anybody where the kids were? And her response was zero emotion. Says it was traumatic and she wasn't ready. And for the next 50 minutes, Nate Eaton sits with a woman who orchestrated a tragedy and acts like she's the misunderstood heroine of her own story. Everybody's just out to get poor old little Lori Vallow Daybell. Lori calls Jesus her friend. She says he told her to write everything down because it would be really good scripture someday. And she speaks with conviction, like she's carrying some divine burden, like she's being called by God to be a vessel of justice rather than judgment. But when Nate asks her directly if she ever predicted the second coming of Christ or gave a date, she completely denies it. This, despite the fact that multiple witnesses, including former friends and believers from her inner circle, testified under oath that she did, that she claimed to receive visions, that she believed she was chosen. He even alluded to the fact that she said that Jesus would come back before her trial was over, and he didn't. So I guess it must have just been a little miscommunication when you were speaking to the Lord and Savior himself, Lori, huh? Maybe he was going through a tunnel. Then, when Nate brings up Chad Daybell's excommunication from the LDS church, a fact confirmed by the church itself, Lori brushes it off with, that was just mean. As if being cut off from the very religion she used to justify her actions doesn't mean anything. Now let's talk about why Chad Daybell was excommunicated from the church, shall we? Chad Daybell was excommunicated from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 2020 after church leaders became aware of his extreme fringe religious teachings and his involvement in a series of disturbing events. Most notably, the disappearance and death of his wife, Lori Vallow's children, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow. I just can't figure out why a church wouldn't want to associate with such a person. And Chad claimed divine authority to identify who was possessed or spiritually compromised. And these ideas, completely outside LDS teachings, were used to justify excommunication and were viewed by the church as not only false doctrine, but dangerous, which his and Lori's actions would prove them absolutely correct. In May of 2024, Chad Daybell was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death by an Idaho jury. He was convicted of the first-degree murders of Tylee Ryan, Lori's 16-year-old daughter, who was dismembered and burned, JJ Vallow, her 7-year-old autistic son, who was found wrapped in plastic and duct tape, Tammy Daybell, his own wife of nearly 30 years, who was suffocated in her sleep just weeks before Chad married Lori. And on top of the murder charges, because Chad is a high-maintenance bitch, he was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud because he had tried to cash in on Tammy's death, and concealment and destruction of evidence since Tylee and JJ were buried in shallow graves on his property. The same property where Lori had moved in. The same backyard where she laughed and took photos while people searched for her missing kids. Chad and Lori didn't just believe in their apocalyptic fantasies. They used them to justify murder, to gain power, to collect life insurance payouts and social security checks, to remove anyone they viewed as an obstacle, including spouses, children, and family. I'm sure Jesus would be so proud of you, Lori. So when Lori sits in an interview and tells Nate Eaton that Chad is still wonderful, perhaps, quote, the kindest person she's ever met, that he's just misunderstood. Let me tell you that Chad Daybell is a convicted murderer, and the state of Idaho has sentenced him to die. Anyways, she goes on to say, quote, God put me here. No, Lori. No. God didn't put you there. A jury did. And what does Nate do in response to this spiritual deflection? He sits in silence. I love it. He lets her speak, not because he agrees, but because sometimes letting someone ramble is the most powerful exposure of all. Honestly, I would love to take a masterclass from Nate Eaton. Nate then looks Lori in the eye and asks the question that all of us want to know. And that was, do you feel remorse for the victims in this case? And Lori, doubling down on the piece of shit that she is, says, and I quote, none of these people were victims. And just sit with that for a second. JJ Vallow, 7 years old, a little boy with autism. I have an 8-year-old autistic son myself. They are the purest human beings. They come with their challenges, but they are just pure and happy to be alive. And he was smothered, bound in duct tape, wrapped in plastic, and his body was discarded like trash. Tylee Ryan was 16, bright, sarcastic, fiercely protective of her little brother, and she was dismembered, burned, and buried. Her remains were so destroyed, they had to be collected in buckets. Tammy Daybell was a mother of 5, an educator, a woman who supported her husband through his entire self-published career, and she died in her sleep, suffocated just weeks before Chad married Lori on a beach in Hawaii. Then we have Charles Vallow. That was Lori's husband, a devoted father figure to JJ, and the one who tried to warn the world. He called the police. He told everyone Lori was dangerous. And for that, he was shot and killed. And still, Lori says, and I quote again, the judicial system plays up the victim thing pretty big. Pure evil is literally turning murder victims into footnotes in her redemption arc. I am so mad right now. Lori has the balls to say in this interview, I never hurt anyone. Everyone knows I didn't hurt anyone. But let's walk through the receipts, shall we? She never called the police when her kids went missing. She never cooperated with law enforcement. She fled to Hawaii. She got married. She took photos on the beach, all while the world searched for her 2 missing children, who she knew were already dead. She accepted Social Security payments in JJ's name after his body was found, wrapped in plastic and buried on her husband, Chad Daybell's property. She moved into the home where both of her children's bodies were buried. She smiled in family photos, and she made no effort to stop the horror unfolding around her, which is so funny because Lori thinks she's so almighty and all powerful, yet she does nothing with all of that power that she claims to have, except cause chaos. So no, Lori, you may not have physically committed each murder, but you can't convince me that you didn't orchestrate everything, that you didn't enable it, and you sit here and you justify it, and you benefited from it. Let me tell you, Charles Manson never killed anyone either, and he still went to prison. And it's important that I say this clearly. Just because someone doesn't wield the weapon doesn't mean that they aren't the reason someone else is dead. And this idea that everyone knows that you didn't hurt anyone. Who's everyone? Find me one person on Beyonce's internet who thinks that Lori Vallow is innocent and didn't hurt anyone. I'll wait. I want to know if you realize that your own words are painting a portrait of a woman disconnected from reality. A woman who can sit there and say with confidence that you've done nothing wrong, while 5 bodies lay in your wake. And this leaves us with the question of, does Lori Vallow really believe what she's selling, or is it all just an act? And if you thought Lori couldn't spiral deeper into her delusions, buckle up. At one point in the interview, she calmly tells Nate Eaton that her children, Tylee and JJ, have come to visit her. Quote, they came to visit me. They don't want me to be sad. I would never visit you, and I want you to be sad every day, all day. Her children were murdered. Their bodies desecrated. And yet she sits there smiling, saying that they comfort her, that they appear to her to reassure her. Bitch, you shouldn't even be allowed to utter their names. She wants to be the protagonist in her story so bad. The misunderstood mother, the chosen messenger, the one who receives visions and heavenly visits. You want it so bad, don't you? Near the end of the interview, Nate Eaton says there are going to be people out there, viewers, victims' families, even journalists who don't think Lori should have a platform. And he's right. But he asks what she would say to them. And she says, anyone can end up in orange. As if this is some cautionary tale about how you can just wind up in a maximum security prison. Now, people can be wrongfully accused, but that's not what we're talking about right now. But hey, Lori, this isn't a story about wrongful accusations, okay? Because there were mounds, heaps, biblical-sized mountains of evidence against you. She minimizes the reality of why she's there. She frames her orange jumpsuit as symbolism, not consequence. By the time she says, I didn't do anything that deserves this kind of punishment, it's almost laughable, except it's not, because children are dead. Her children are dead. And their stories, Lori, will always matter more than yours. And just when you think Lori has reached the peak of delusion, she looks at Nate Eaton in the eye and she says, quote, all of the women here in maximum security protective custody are wrongfully accused. All of them? Every single one? Lori paints herself as the part of a sisterhood of traveling orange pants of injustice. Not only is she innocent, but everyone around her is too. It's a convenient narrative where no one is responsible and everyone is a victim of the big bad judicial system. Lori, you're in protective custody because the public outrage is so severe that the threat to your safety is real. And I think, honestly, that you should be let out and we can just see what happens. But who am I? I don't know why you should ever have more protection than your children ever did. But I digress. And by the end of the interview, when Lori says, I didn't do anything to deserve that, I can't even. I didn't do anything to deserve this kind of punishment. I could literally think of like 20 things that you did that deserve more than the punishment you received. But by the time Lori reaches the end of the interview, she sits across from Nate Eaton, serene and almost smug, as if she's just wrapped up a book club chat, not a conversation about dead children, exhumed graves, and first-degree murder charges. No remorse, no sorrow. Not even a shred, a sliver, the smallest of smallest, tiny bit of humility. Just a passive shrug at the destruction left in her wake. She doesn't acknowledge JJ or Tylee or Charles or Tammy. She only centers herself, again, as the misunderstood heroine, the wrongly accused, the woman God sent on a mission too divine to be comprehended. She doesn't say their names with grief. She doesn't mourn. She doesn't flinch when reminded of the condition of her own children, the condition that they were found in. And Lori thinks that she'll walk free. And this is all just some test of her divine character. Well, Lori, why don't you just hold your breath until we get there? Now, let's talk about the real dilemma that this interview presents. The one we all feel as viewers, creators, and consumers of true crime. Should people like Lori Vallow be given a platform? Because on one hand, giving her airtime feels bad. She's manipulative, she's delusional, she offers literally nothing of substance. But on the other hand, if we don't let people like Lori speak, then they get to hide in mystery. They become a blank slate, a misunderstood symbol. And the question is that more dangerous? Honestly, I think that we should be able to say whatever we want about her on the internet, and they should let her slink away into her hole and shrivel up while wearing that stupid half ponytail. That's just my opinion. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think people like Lori Vallow should be allowed to do interviews at all? Do you believe she genuinely thinks she's innocent, or this is all just a part of her performance? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. I'll be reading and responding, and let's keep this conversation going. If you want a full updated breakdown of the entire Lori Vallow Daybell case in my current format, let me know. I've got you. Make sure to watch some of our other videos that are around here. My name is Bacon Bears, and that's my opinion. I'll see you next time.